we have the early signing that occurred in December, and it got moved a few weeks earlier this year than past years, and the late signing, which is today. 30 total student athletes out of high school that we brought in. That was our target number. We'll go through the numbers here in a minute. A few things that we wanted to make sure we had was, number one, we wanted to make sure that we had our local areas properly covered. And we did. Both Minnesota as well as Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, those are states that put a good number of players into our program. Certainly the portal is all the topic nowadays. You guys know that traditionally we're not a enormous transfer program. We did decide to bring 4 mid-years in, 4 guys transfer in, and we'll show you those as well. But some common themes of the 30 guys, concentrated mostly in the upper Midwest. A lot of multi-sport kids, 21 of the 30, I believe, are multi-sport athletes. That's awesome, especially nowadays. 7 of them can play positions on either side of the football, and that is unique. That's not something that traditionally has occurred in our Division I since the Division I transition. It absolutely occurred in the old division, and it served us well. And last thing, a lot of guys that's, whether it's in football or their other sport, tons of state champion performances and all-state players. So, as always, it's more important now than it's ever been because we can only have 110 players on our team. Back in the day where you could have 120 or 128 or 132, you could be a lot less intentional. And I think our staff did a really, really good job. Our whole coaching staff, our operations staff, Caitlin Reed, our recruiting staff, all of them, of making sure that each person was here for intentionality. I would say, I don't have the exact number, I would say about 1/3 of that class is specifically placed for positional need. I mean, they all have the position they're going to play, and after that, you're looking for someone who's going to be the best athlete and the best teammate and able to grow. Those are not just grabbed out of thin air. Those percentages run fairly concurrent now that we have 4 years of data points of a Division I football with the guys that actually do end up playing. So in a class of 28 to 30, which is our average class since we transitioned, on average, about 8 of those will play their freshman year. 8.5 on average will actually play in 8, 10, 12 games. Another third will play, but might only play in 3 or 4 games where we can still redshirt them. And then another third won't play in maybe more than 1 game or no games because they're developmental. So that's where we get those numbers from. It's not just a guess.
Glenn, you mentioned the multi-sport athletes and the kids that have the potential to play on either side of the ball. Why was that? What made that flexibility so important to you?
Well, also think of the other side of that argument that I just laid out. So now you only have 110 spots, and if I recruit you, Jeff, and all you could do is play wide receiver, then your paths to victory for you as a person are limited. But if we have a scenario where Kevin might be able to play receiver just about as good as you, but he can also backpedal and play DB, well, that gives that person more paths to victory. And so what we tried to do is we tried to meld those two things together, because when we could bring in classes of however big you wanted to, we had a lot of guys that could play different positions, and we purely went looking after best athlete. Very rarely would it be a guy to come in and play right away unless that was a transfer situation. And it worked really, really well for us. And at the beginning of this conversation, when I was talking about quarterbacks, keep in mind, I brought up an example of one of our best players on our whole team is Brandon Smith, who will get a shot to get looked at by pro scouts. But he's going to get a shot to get looked at by pro scouts playing corner. Not 4 years ago, we were standing here with you guys sitting there saying he's going to be a quarterback and we might move him. So there is a lot of good reasons for someone that could do that, but really it comes down to opportunities for that young man and then how that applies to our team being able to be a little bit better.
You've been talking about expanding the states you can pull from for the camps for recruiting, like California you were talking about. How's the Division I sort of team, how's that helped you expand your brand across the country like that?
I can't put a percentage on it. It's tough to quantify, but what I can tell you is the way that our brand has been able to spread. And look, some of it was probably kicked off well for us because of the manner that we were dismissed from our old conference, right? So all of a sudden you're on, PTI and Sports Center and those kind of things. That definitely helps, right? Some of that was probably facilitated by the fact that there were a lot of eyeballs that were on our transition at that point. And then we've been blessed to be able to have some success. I mean, we're not even 4 years in, and we're in our league. We have the best record of any team in our league over that 4-year span. We've had years where we go undefeated, we win a championship, and that probably highlights it as well. But it's a lot of things. It's you see a basketball team just the other day playing on CBS, right? And that's just another way for someone to say, oh yeah, I remember that Shield. Isn't that team that got kicked out of Division III out of their old conference? And so it stays with them. And then I think the biggest thing that we've been able to do is put a consistent product together where the people that leave here go back home and talk about the positive experience that they had. So it's tremendous. But I will say the camps were probably the #1 unintended reason of how we spread that message, because when you pull from 49 states in your country, and the one we didn't have wasn't Alaska and it wasn't Hawaii. You want to guess what it is?
Massachusetts.
It was New Hampshire. So if there's a New Hampshire guy out there, it was New Hampshire. But when you do that, that tells you that your brand is getting out there, and grateful that it is. And frankly, that was part of the intention of what football and this move could do for this university, was to not change who we are, bring who we are to a national stage and have more breadth with that. Great question. What other questions you guys have?
What would you say is the identity of this class, or what really jumps out to you about this class as a whole?
Multiplicity. I mean, whether we're talking about athletic multiplicity, whether it's they're more than 2/3 of the class are multi-sport athletes, that is rare nowadays, right? And I love that. What would be the percentages? 24% can play positions on either side of the ball, including your bigs. That's never happened before. So being able to find guys that can do things, and one thing that I'm grateful for is the academic integrity and the rigor of St. Thomas and what this degree can do for you has preempted us. And of these 30 guys, I'm talking the high school guys, more than half of those were coached by someone who, more than half, that we either coached here at St. Thomas, we coached somewhere else, or we have a very, very close 30-year connection with. And I think when someone knows who you are, and you're not just jumping around to be different at your school, or you're not jumping around to be at different schools, it allows, people say it gives people a better target. Well, that goes both ways. It cuts both ways. It allows the coaches throughout the country to know when they send their kid to St. Thomas exactly what they're getting, and that's not changing.
You guys soon becoming postseason eligible. Did that factor into any of these kids' decision to come here? Was that a selling point?
Yeah, I can't say it didn't, Joe. I could just say that, and that's a good question. I can just say that it did not come up once in conversation. And think about the conversations. These are the 30 that we got. To get these 30, we're probably seriously looking at 600 and visiting 300 to get 10% of that. And the average kid in this class was here 3 times. So that's a lot of data points, and not once did that actually come up. I'm grateful that that scenario has happened. I think President Rob Vischer, I think Vice President Phil Eston have done an amazing job of letting the country see who we are. I know that 2 years ago, when we went undefeated and won the league, the number of texts I got when the bracket came out from buddies across the country, because they didn't know, and I said, well, they were only in year 2, so we're gonna have to sit and wait. So I can't say it didn't affect them, but if you think about it, we really haven't made a huge deal of it. The biggest class it would have affected is the class that we're gonna celebrate and graduate now when we have our senior banquet next week. That was the class that has the biggest effect on. But, and again, all that is a possible opportunity. I don't even know if we're gonna be good enough yet to win enough games to get a chance to do that, but we got the time to figure it out.
Glenn, I know you like to develop your own quarterbacks, but did you give much consideration to bringing in an experienced quarterback to compete with Michael for the #1 job?
We did, and we think that we We think that partially, so we looked at guys and we did not get some in the first window. I want to be really, really clear, but it was a really, really high bar that we were looking at. I felt like with the guys we have, namely a guy we took last year in Ryan Jackson, who we were able to get good experience to and still redshirt out of Lyons Township, Player of the Year down there. I think he's a guy who's going to be able to compete as well. But let's just look at the sheer numbers. On day 3 of portal window 1 this year, it was a Wednesday, opens on a Monday, there's about 7,000 people in there. 7,000 on day 3. Last year on the same date, there was half of that number. So between teams reducing their roster size because of new rules and legislation, because of more people not staying where they initially went, and just the overall environment, there's a lot of opportunity, and we decided to aim in a certain way in the first window, and it'll probably be a little bit different if we choose to do that in the second window. But there's nothing wrong with bringing in a great polished quarterback at all. We just have to make sure that we find the right one, because for every one kid you bring into your program, you have to answer to the other 109. And I think that's something that we've done it's not easy to do. It's a lot easier to just take the guy that runs fast and throws the ball far and hits the quarterback hard. But every guy that we bring into this program is done so through the lens of how will he increase or improve the culture of the other 109. So for that reason, you can say, I'll say stalwart because I like the positive connotation. You can say laborious if you want, if you don't want it to have a positive connotation, but we're gonna be slow to go and then go once we know.